All right, so we won't get too much in your first book yet, but I imagine you probably learned a lot in that experience. What did you get from that to where it got you to do your second book?
Yeah, I feel like the first one was kind of difficult in the sense like everyone kind of says like the first one of anything is kind of difficult. Like some of the poems in the first collection I had like from like I wrote in college, and then also like figuring out how to organize it, and then I put like a deadline for me to like release it. And so honestly, looking back, I'm proud of it, but I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like I did a much better job of like organizing and taking more time kind of nitpicking each poem with my editor the second time around. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me was like not rushing it and like being willing to like chop up poems. Like I remember sitting, I met at like a tea shop off of Pearl Street, food shop, and me and my editor Molly Fox, we sat down. And there was one poem specifically, does my argument still stand? And I had it and I was like really attached to it. I was like, I don't want to change anything. She's like, yeah, I don't think these really work. I think we can do better. And then we literally like spent like over an hour just chopping it up. And then we finished it and I was like, oh my goodness, this is way better than the first one. So things like that, just like spending time and being willing to like pick apart the poem.
Was that challenging because it's like trying to slow down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, running. To be better and run faster, you kind of have to slow down a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But to have somebody take apart a piece of work and then look at it in a different way, like accepting that it's not easy, right?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of that, and then also like I was also kind of thinking of it in this sense where I wrote that poem also kind of a while ago, like a couple years ago. So I was like, I was in a different mental space for that. I want to make sure that like what I was writing about actually still comes through in the finished product. So I think it was like that factored in, as well as like kind of being like, okay, well maybe I can make this better, and let's give it the chance to do it a different way and try and make it better. So yeah, it was a mixture of both.
Do you think in the future, or if you already did it now, would you revisit something you wrote years back and kind of refresh it and I don't know, update it and see where you're at and how to compare?
I think so. I think of like another, so in this first collection, there's another example. I actually had two different editors, one for this one and a different one for the new one. But in the first collection, I have a poem, The Door, which is actually a really cool story, kind of background behind that. I wrote it while I was on a run, and I was like 7 miles into my 14-mile run. In like Virginia back home, and I like just wrote it in my head, and then I was like, okay, I have a couple options. I can either go home and like just memorize it on my way home, and then frantically write it down, stop at someone's house and be like, I need a pen and paper right now so I don't forget this. But I decided to just like memorize it. Memorized it, got home, wrote it down. But that one I sat with my editor and I think we switched the order of some of the stanzas, and then also like added a little bit more to it and cut a little bit out. And I think it ended up a lot better too. But I was recently reading through this collection as a whole, just like a couple days ago, and I was thinking, oh man, it'd be cool to like revisit some of these poems. And I feel like as a poet, you're always like, oh, I could write that better. I don't know. We'll see. I thought about maybe doing like a re-release of this first collection and doing like a second edition and maybe changing up the cover a little bit, and then maybe I could tweak it with poems.
Yeah. So for like the second one, what did you do to, or what keeps you motivated or inspired to do a second book? Because after doing one, it's got to be a little bit exhausting, right?
Yeah, I was actually sitting down and talking to one of my friends like a week or two ago, and it's kind of weird. Like I feel like in high school and growing up, I kind of like hated reading and writing because I was like kind of like forced to do it. And then a big turning point was like junior year of high school. I had a really great English professor, and then carried over into senior year, and I actually almost I also had a really good chemistry professor, so I almost decided to study chemistry in college. But then I was like, oh no, I really like English, I'm gonna do that. But I think like, I guess discovering my passion for like reading great stories and then writing kind of took a little bit. But then also like, I mean, I remember as a kid, I don't even think I have access to this, but like I was writing like a play or something like as a little kid, and I remember vividly. I think I was doing it like on Microsoft Word, and I like had like these like random like I don't know, it was Photoshop or just like custom photos that I just would insert, and I was like, oh yeah, this looks good here. But I guess like writing's always kind of been around in my life, and so for me, I kind of look at like writing and reading and like there are two separate phases. So you have like the absorption phase where you're like just absorbing content and I'm just reading and not really writing as much. And then you have like the creating phase where I'm writing more and probably not reading as much. Probably reading still a little bit, but more writing. And for me, sometimes it takes me a while to like get what I'm thinking across or like really like understand where I'm going with the poem. But I've never like felt like, oh, I have to write today, or like the words aren't coming to me. I just kind of like usually I'm like hit where I'm like, oh, okay, I want to write something, and I had this idea like last night, for instance. I like got ready for bed, was ready to go to bed, and I was like, oh, I have a great idea for a poem. And so I turned on my light, turned on some music, sat at the desk, and then it like took me a while. Like I wrote the first stanza, and then I was like, okay, what am I trying to say here? And then slowly like worked on it, and then I think I wrote like 4 stanzas. I was pretty happy with it, but that's kind of how it just happens naturally. So I don't know if that answers your question.